Today marks 5 years since this channel first went live on YouTube. Oh man, it seems like only yesterday that I was saying, I'd better get a video done, it's the 5-year anniversary tomorrow. And so to celebrate, I'm going to Swindon. I've been meaning to come here for a while, and specifically to Steam, the Museum of the Great Western Railway. Swindon housed the works of the Great Western Railway, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that for a long time, Swindon and the GWR works were practically synonymous. The Great Western Railway was founded in 1835 at the behest of a consortium of Bristol businessmen, who saw the dawn of the railway era and figured that their port would get left behind if they didn't get in on the ground floor. Isambard Kingdom Brunel was the engineer who tends to get the credit for the GWR, but Swindon was the idea of his assistant and friend Daniel Gooch. Gooch was the kind of man that Brunel needed. While Brunel had big ideas, Gooch was good at the practical side. Gooch believed Swindon was the perfect location for the railway's works for 4 major reasons. Firstly, the Wilts and Berks Canal ran through. The railway network was patchy in the 1830s, but the canals were pretty comprehensive. Secondly, it was almost exactly 2/3 of the way to Bristol. Thirdly, it was at the junction with the line to Cheltenham. And finally, there was a topographical divide. West of Swindon, the route got a lot hillier, so it was an obvious place to stable extra engines. The works opened in 1843. As the company grew, more and more of its facilities moved to Swindon. Early on, they decided to build locomotives in-house rather than order from outside contractors, as was normal at the time. The original version of North Star here was built by Robert Stephenson's works, actually for a railway in New Orleans. It wasn't the Great Western Railway's first locomotive, but it was arguably the first one that was any good. The carriage and wagon works were moved here in 1868. In 1873 they got their own foundry. Track and station fittings were manufactured here, as well as carts, lorries and vans. The works had its own fire brigade. There were stores of goods to stock the stations and carriages. More or less anything the Great Western Railway could possibly need came from Swindon one way or another, and the GWR grew to become one of the biggest companies of any kind in Britain. In 1892 they boasted that Swindon was the largest railway works in the world. They turned out an engine a week, a carriage a day, and a wagon an hour. The works employed thousands of people, and those people needed to be housed. So the railway had houses, schools, hospitals, shops, and even churches built for their workforce. Employees of the railway enjoyed an excellent standard of health care, and by the standards of the Victorian era, a job on the railway was not a bad gig. It was secure, regular, decently, if not amazingly well paid. It came with benefits, and it offered the chance for career progression. A hard-working lad could really make something of himself at Swindon. 1892 would see the works employ more people than ever before, but not for a good reason. Remember what I said about Brunel not always being the most practical person? Well, that's kind of epitomised by the GWR in its early days. Brunel laid his track to broad gauge, 7 feet and 1/4 inch, or a little over 2 meters, between the rails. That's why North Star here is so wide. Stephenson gauge, favoured by Robert Stephenson and his father and fellow engineer George, was 4 feet 8½ inches. Brunel had his reasons for going against the grain. Great Western engines could be bigger, stronger, faster and more stable, their carriages were roomier and smoother riding, and their wagons had more capacity. But as the rest of the railway network grew, Stephenson gauge became the standard, and as early as 1846 Parliament mandated that no new broad gauge railways should be built without a really good reason. Incredibly, the GWR kept with it for more than 40 years, but in 1892 they officially abandoned the broad gauge. In a very short space of time their track was re-gauged, and any rolling stock that couldn't be converted was scrapped. To carry this out, Swindon employed an army of temporary workers from the farms all around. 2 broad gauge locomotives were retained, named North Star and Lord of the Isles. They were displayed in the paint shop at the works until 1906, when the unsentimental chief mechanical engineer, George Jackson Churchward, had them cut up. All that survives of Lord of the Isles is this set of wheels here. In 1904, the Great Western set a speed record when their locomotive City of Truro hit 100 miles per hour while hauling the ocean mails. Well, it's highly disputed as to whether it actually did hit that speed and whether it was the first locomotive to do so. But I think most people accept that if it didn't, it came very close. Despite the GWR being incredibly publicity conscious, the record wasn't officially made public until 1922. The Great Western Railway managed to avoid losing its identity in 1923 when Britain's railways were grouped together. In 1925, the new companies held a cavalcade to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the opening of the pioneering Stockton and Darlington Railway. And for this, somewhat embarrassingly, the Great Western had to construct a replica of North Star using parts of the original. That's the engine you see today. In the following years, some of the most powerful and prestigious locomotives in British railway history were built here. You've probably heard of Flying Scotsman, but this is Caerphilly Castle, Scotsman's great rival. The Castle class was followed by the even more powerful Kings, like King George V here. In 1935, the Great Western celebrated its centenary, and North Star was wheeled out once again to celebrate. The company officially ceased to exist at nationalisation in 1948, but Swindon retained a reputation for doing its own thing that didn't really square with the standardised British rail network. Unfortunately, this was in part its downfall. The unusual diesel hydraulic locomotives that Swindon liked were favoured by no other region. And when the time came for BR to get rid of one of their major works, Swindon stuck out as the one to go. Despite extensive protests by the people of Swindon, for whom the works were still a major employer, the doors closed for good in 1986. But the works are far from vanished. The substantial buildings still stand, many of them listed and repurposed, such as the ones that house the outlet mall here. And of course, the memory of the works is excellently preserved at Steam. Today, once again, the Great Western Railway runs through Swindon, albeit not the same company, and its trains aren't maintained here. So that's a brief history of Swindon Works and the railway it served. In truth, there's a lot I've glossed over. Actually, when I started writing this script, it was just supposed to be a couple of introductory sentences. But oh well, I've got this far, and I've hardly talked about the anniversary of this channel. I know, maybe as well as a really long intro, I'll do a really long outro. Here goes. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, I'd be grateful if you could hit the like button and subscribe for more, if you have not already done so. I would like to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your support. You are the rail mill to my standard gauge track. But I'd also like to thank everyone watching this, and everyone who's ever watched one of my videos. When I first started this channel 5 years ago, it was just a little side project. I didn't think it would last long, much less take off, much less become my actual job. Since then, I've been to lots of fun places, I've met lots of interesting people, I've made lots of friends, and I've learnt all sorts of things. And I'm getting paid for it. It really doesn't get any better than that. As for what the future holds, well, if there's one thing this channel has taught me, it's that the future is probably not what you think it's going to be. There may be changes coming to the channel. One thing I've been considering is reducing the number of videos I put out in favour of making longer and more in-depth ones, because I really like doing deep dives into subjects. But it's kind of hard to get as deep as I'd like when there are 2 more videos to do that week, even if I keep the other 2 short. And to be honest, that's how mistakes creep in, which drives me up the wall. So it is possible, I'm not saying it's definite, but it is possible that I will reduce the number of videos if I have ideas that require more time, if the video justifies it. But we'll see. I also talked a while back about starting a model railway channel. Well, I would still like to do model railway videos, but 2 things held me back. Firstly, I don't think I have time for a separate channel alongside this one. And secondly, I kept finding myself writing scripts that felt like they belonged on this channel. So what I'm thinking is, I might experiment with model railway videos on this channel, which was something I did a lot in the early days. So I guess things have come full circle. So I'd like to finish by once again thanking every one of you for making this channel what it is, what it has been, and what it will be. Without you guys, I'd never have got to 5 years. Here's hoping for many more. And I'll see you all again very soon. Cheerio.